Hey guys, how's it going? It's Andy from Go Investing. Today we're going to be talking about a trend that I've been seeing on TikTok specifically. And if you've been around some of the videos that get posted on TikTok, they're pretty ridiculous in nature for the most part. But this trend that I've been seeing recently, and they've been very popular videos, are ones that are having people follow the trades of politicians. And a lot of it has seen incredible success. They have stocks that are up like 25% in a couple weeks after the disclosures become public. And so I wanted to talk about this trend of people following, the people in the know. And in this video, I want to talk about kind of my thoughts on insider trading, but then insider trading usually refers to people that are a part of a company. So one of the kind of bold trends that you can see with companies is that if an executive within a company buys or sells stock, they have to disclose what they do. And if you see insiders buying aggressively, it usually means that the company is kind of going on the right track. And so this is something that people see as a bull case for a lot of companies. And with politicians are in a unique position where they get insider information about kind of how the world economy is going. And so this has come to the forefront pretty recently during the pandemic when we had 4 senators that were accused of getting insider information about the severity of the pandemic and then decided to sell out of a lot of shares. We had 3 Republicans, and we had the dinosaur herself and Dianne Feinstein of California. And so this has brought up a discussion on kind of the responsibility of politicians to disclose what type of positions that they're buying and selling. And there are specific websites that specifically allow you to see exactly what senators are buying. I'm on senatestockwatcher.com, and you can go through pretty much every senator that has to disclose it a certain amount of times during the year. And there's a lot of companies on here that you and I have probably never heard of. And so it's a really interesting way for people to kind of get on board with a company, and then it usually ends up doing very well. And so in this video, I want to talk about 3 different things about picking stocks, because this all came about because I had someone that I work with ask about, my recommendations for how I pick stocks going forward. And they mentioned this TikTok trend of following politicians. And so I'm going to talk about that in part 2. Part 1, I'm going to talk about ETFs versus individual stocks. This is something that I've talked about at the beginning of this year, but I thought I wanted to reiterate my thoughts in this video. And the next, I want to talk about my view of politicians owning individual stocks. And then I'm going to ask your thoughts about politicians owning stocks, if you believe that they should only be allowed to buy kind of ETFs that follow the overall market. And then number 3, I'm going to talk about how I pick my individual stocks, because it might not be the most efficient way of doing it, but it's the thing that makes me feel the most confident going forward. And I don't see, my way of picking stocks changing anytime soon. So obviously not financial advice, and let's get into it. So part 1, ETFs versus individual stocks. This was a conversation that I had with a bunch of my coworkers, because it's really intimidating to put your money into any different stock or ETF just in general, because there is an inherent risk about losing money if the stock market falls. And so here's how I kind of view the difference between ETFs versus individual stocks. When I look at ETFs, I'm totally fine buying an ETF that follows the overall market. As everyone pretty much knows at this point, the stock market on average has returned around 10% annually for the past 100 years or so. And so what this means is that with an ETF that follows the overall market, you're not guaranteed, but it's very likely that your ETF is going to have similar results to the overall market. So you have, the benefit of making 10% a year, and it's relatively safe, because when you're buying an ETF that follows the overall market, it's going to average out all the winners and losers. Picking individual stocks is great because it allows you to outperform the overall market. You have companies that, are going to double in a single year. You're never going to have an ETF that's really going to double in a single year if it's one of the, well-known ones that's following the overall market, something like an SPY, QQQ, just because that's not how the law of large numbers works. When you have a law of large numbers, the more stocks you're going to have, it's going to get closer to the actual mean. And so if you buy an individual stock, you have the possibility of getting the high end, a company that doubles, triples, quadruples in a year. But then you also have the possibility of picking the loser of the bunch that has some fraud allocations or something that drops 50% in 1 year. So you have the time commitment of picking individual stocks, which I think is pretty intimidating for a lot of people. How do you pick out one specific stock out of the thousands of ones that you have the opportunity to? So for people that don't want to put in the time of picking individual stocks, I think ETFs are very attractive. The risk versus outperforming the overall market. 10% a year is a great way to build wealth. But if you want to be more aggressive and have higher returns, you do take the inherent risk of picking individual stocks, which is what I mentioned. And then the flexibility. The flexibility of picking individual stocks, I think, is very beneficial for a lot of people. I am someone that I'm pretty young, I'm 24. I know a lot about the tech sector. So I'm going to be buying individual tech stocks because, I can kind of tell which ones are the winners and the losers based off of where I see the trends going with technology. If I was looking in a sector that I didn't know that much about, maybe something like financials, I have some opinions about individual stocks from financials. I know Wells Fargo is horrible. I don't like using Bank of America, but I know it's not horrible. I might consider buying an ETF that follows that overall sector because I don't have as much information on it. And so when it all gets put together, it really depends on how much risk you're willing to take and how much time you're wanting to put in. For most people, they just kind of want to set it and forget it, and ETFs are a great way to do that. If you want to try to outperform the overall market, individual stocks are a great option. That's why I pick individual stocks, because I'm going into a career field. I'm not going to be making that much money, so I need to be able to try to outperform the overall market to try to put myself on pace to retire comfortably. Number 2, let's talk about TikTok following the politician buys. So this is something that a law went into place in 2012. I believe it's called the Stock Act, which when you look at how it passed 96-3 in the Senate and 417-2 in the House of Representatives. And I can't think of pretty much any other law going through that has had that type of support, bipartisan support that is, in a long time. So it's pretty interesting to see that this was, almost a decade ago, and how much it was pretty much a straight shot through. So it's pretty interesting. But basically what it meant for the Stock Act was that politicians in the Senate were not able to use insider information that they learned from their position to kind of influence their picks going forward. And so when you had the pandemic, you had people that were on the intelligence committee that were getting this information saying, the pandemic's going to be really bad. And then they're selling out of specific stocks that were going to do poorly and then buying into ones that would later end up being put into the stay-at-home stock kind of category. And so you had a couple senators that got in pretty big trouble from that. I believe one of them, Senator Burr, got removed from his head on the intelligence committee. But it's tough because I see people, benefiting from this information that becomes public, and that's great. You always want to see people do well, but inherently, you're not really setting yourself up to succeed. I've also seen this a lot with people that pay lots of money to get, extra information when it comes to some of these high-profile YouTubers. They want to see exactly what they're trading and kind of follow them. That's great if you're picking someone that, knows what they're doing, but that's kind of the point of a financial advisor, because you're paying them to kind of take your trades for you. When you're following someone, whether it be a politician, a YouTuber, or just a friend, you're not really learning anything. You're just kind of mimicking what they're doing. And so say this YouTuber just falls off the face of the earth, doesn't post anymore. Say you have a buddy that, you're not as close with anymore. You kind of get this false sense of security that you're very good at what you're doing, even though you're just kind of following someone blindly and you don't actually have the information background to succeed on your own. And so following politicians, I think, is fine. I personally don't believe that politicians should be able to own individual stocks. And let me know in the comment section down below if you agree or disagree with that. And I'd love to have a tame conversation about what you think politicians should be able to do and can't do when it comes to buying and owning stocks. Number 3, let's finish up the video talking about how I pick individual stocks. I pick individual stocks based on kind of 3 main criteria. The first one is I only buy companies that I understand. As I mentioned, if I'm going into a sector that I don't know, I'm not going to be buying individual stocks. I'm going to be buying an ETF that follows the overall sector and will average out the winners and the losers. It makes it so that I'm less likely to sell if the overall market falls. Say you buy some company this politician bought and the market falls. You only bought it because you thought it was going to do well because this politician had insider information. You're more than likely going to be selling it for a loss. And so we want to avoid that at all costs because, as we know, when the stock market falls, it usually takes around 1.5 to 2 years to recover, unless we're in the pandemic and it bounces back within 9 months and is reaching all-time highs pretty much every week. But number 2, I want a history of outperforming the overall stock market. It doesn't make sense for me to buy an individual stock that has underperformed the overall stock market, because that's why you can just buy an ETF that follows the overall market. You're trying to get above the average when it comes to stock market returns. And if you don't see that, or if you don't see a catalyst for why you think that'll be changing from underperforming to overperforming, I don't see any reason to buy that individual stock. An example for that is I like buying tech companies because I understand them and they have a history of outperforming the overall market. And then for a company like GE that is significantly discounted and is not outperforming the overall market, is significantly down from its 2015, maybe 2014 highs. But I see a catalyst for why I think it's going to do well going forward. I see GE going forward with renewables, I think is very attractive. Then the recovery of the aviation industry. And so those are my main reasons why I think it will outperform the overall market in the upcoming years. Even though it hasn't in the past, I see kind of the trajectory for it to do well going forward. And then number three, I like to try to dollar cost average. I don't think it's important to buy, like 1,000 different stocks and just kind of keep adding. My whole plan is I want to pick like 10 to 15 stocks that I absolutely love and dollar cost average into them. Dollar cost averaging is kind of the idea of investing on a regular basis and continually adding to your positions. This is something that I've always struggled with in the past because I like buying on discounts. It's so much more attractive to buy a stock that you think is significantly undervalued as compared to buying a stock that has recently hit all-time highs. But it leads me to the problem of I just keep my money on the sideline and I try to time the market too much. And timing the market is very difficult to do. If you can do it well, you can make a lot of money. But for the average Joe like you and me, I think it's better to just dollar cost average in. So with my new job coming up, I'm going to have steadier income. And so every week I'm going to be putting money into 2 different places. And one week I'm going to be buying into more Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is probably the most attractive thing on the overall stock market or just places to invest at this point. It's been able to hold the 30,000 mark. I'm up around 150% already, but I wanted to buy more off of this dip as it's held that level. And then the other weeks, I'm just going to be buying into my normal investing account and buying normal stocks and dollar cost averaging. I might buy ETFs to follow the overall market to try to keep my money relatively safe. But as of right now, I'm trying to add into my positions every week or every other week, depending on how you look at it. So I'm very curious how you guys decide what stocks you guys like to buy and what stocks you guys are watching going forward. Thanks for watching. I appreciate all the support, and I will see you in the next video.